Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome back to the Eretz Chem, the Beit Midrash, where we are guests, and we are so happy that we're here, and we are very thankful for the Beit Midrash allowing us to partake of. In fact, we're here every morning, but here we are Thursday nights, and I want to just a warm welcome to everybody home to Torah. I just want to mention about this particular concept that we're going to be dealing with tonight is about achdut and the situation we're in. We all know we're in a milchama, in a war, and what we need in order to win this war is achdut, and that's going to be the theme for tonight. We are in Parshat Tisa. That's in Exodus chapter 30, verse 34. Why is it also very pertinent? We have just acquired, we're in the process of fully acquiring a Sefer Torah, and we're going to start a minion for beginners, where we will go slower than most binyanim, prayer groups, and we're going to have classes before, for anybody that wants to get up a little bit earlier, and we'll have classes after with breakfast. The only thing is missing is a place. So we're actively searching for a place in this area. I'm going to say the German colony, Baka, Katamon, and Bezrat Hashem. We will find that place in the right time, and everything will just work out just fine. And I'm bringing this up because we are doing a fundraiser for the Sefer Torah that we are in the process of fully acquiring, and there'll be a link below where you can donate, just even a few words, a few letters. Right? Okay, so it's going to be part of the theme tonight, and I think you'll pick it up. Achdus and accepting of people who are new, especially Balei Tshuva, new at Yiddishkeit, and would like a place where they could daven, not in such a rush. Right? Okay, so we are in Exodus chapter 30, verse 34. And the ideas that I'm giving over are absolutely fundamental. Some of them are very famous. You're going to be familiar with many of the ideas I'm going to share, but it's the way the Yakar creates this tapestry, and he connects everything together. In fact, the word ketoret, we're going to be dealing with one or two or three verses, dealing with what we call the ketoret, the actual incense. Now, I mentioned there's a tapestry and everything's connected. Even the word ketoret, Chazal tell us, it means kishur, connection. Okay? And you'll understand. So achdus, which means unity of the Jewish people, and kishur, you could use kishur in relation bein adam lechavero, between man and man, and in terms of bein adam lemakom, between man and God. So there's two concepts we're going to be dealing with, and let's begin. So in Exodus chapter 30, verse 34, we'll say it in English first, then we'll read the Hebrew. And the Lord said to Moses, take for yourself aromatics. These are the samim. I would have called them herbs, but it's basically the ingredients of the incense, namely the balsam sap, which is the natah, and I can't pronounce this English word, oncha, that is the shechelet. Then you have, and I'm not going to use this English word, but I'll read it once, galbonim, which is the chelbana. That's the word we're going to focus. It comes out not the first word, and it's not the last word, which will be significant. So, and then you have aromatics of and pure frankincense. That's the halavana. The lavana is a sweet-smelling, everyone knows that it smells nice, but the truth is there are actually 11 different ingredients. There's a machlokas, some say 12, maybe even break it up into 13, but let's just use the number 11. So there are 11, but they're not listed here. But we have the oral Torah. It was given over to Moshe at Mount Sinai. And we have 11. And it just happens to be these that are listed here, they should be of equal weight. So they're going to be all the same in terms of the weight. The other ingredients are not necessarily of equal weight. So in Hebrew, V'yomer Hashem el Moshe, kach lecha samim, and here's the list, Nataf, Shechelis, V'chelbana, Samim, Ulevona, Zocha bad, Babad yet. It has to be ground here it's of equal weight. That means of equal weight. Okay, look at Rashi right away, and he tells us this particular thing called Chelbana is a spice of vile odor. I mean, it is putrid, okay? It is really bad smelling. We're talking about the smell is bad. Now, the Torah counted it amongst all the other ingredients of this kataris, of the incense, in order to teach us. Oh my God, I'd ask for a drum roll, but nobody has any tables here. They're all chairs. Drum roll, come on, we could do it. Drum roll. That we should not look askance at including Poshe Yisrael, Jewish transgressors with us when we assemble for fasting or prayer. And I'll just add to that list any other, let's say, religious ceremony for that matter. But basically, fasting and prayer. Why do we fast? We'll have to talk about it. Obviously, prayer is in order to do kishur, in order to connect with Hashem. And the truth is, the root, the hitpalel, it's reflexive. It actually means plili. The hitpalel is based on the idea of introspection, self-judgment. When we pray, we're actually doing self-judgment. Anyway, the Torah instructs us that they should be counted with us. Remember I said in the beginning, we're going to be dealing with a concept called achdus. So we're going to count these people with us. We don't exclude them. We don't discount them. We don't discredit them. We don't push them away, but we include them. And we'll have to discuss what does it mean. So the main definition of a sinner, of someone who's a rasha, is basically somebody whose sins are more than their mitzvahs. And it could be the other way around. Who's a tzaddik? Anybody that has more mitzvahs, more credit to their deeds than averos, than sin. Most of us, hopefully, are at least Benoni and above, right? At least 50-50. Who could be 50-50? Number one, how do you know yourself? And how would you ever in your own life, ever judge anybody else? Only God knows, okay? But that'll be the working definition for a rasha. Obviously, we could think of many people who just have bad character, and we would probably want to put them in that category. But perhaps that's not the way how God looks at it, but I have a feeling that he does count that in part of the cheshbon. So let's start with the Yakar. By the way, I really encourage people to learn Hebrew. And these sheets, pretty sheets, are just in black and white for you guys. But you can find down below a link to the site where you can pick up, and I encourage you to read along with us. Now, it's actually quite short. So we're going to kind of run through it, but then we're going to go through the explanations of the connection between the ketoret and fasts. We didn't even know that yet. And we're going to go through the concepts of achdus among some of the greatest rabbis that ever lived. So, mana hechelbona bein simone ketoris. As we are aware that this chelbana is included, right? It's counted amongst the rest of the ingredients or herbs for the incense. Why? Like we saw Rashi. Lilamed otanu, in order to teach us, litzaref, that we should connect, combine, join, include, Poshe Yisrael b'kol ta'anit, the sinners of Israel, with all of our public fasts. Now, this is a Gemara in Kritot, which we will actually go into depth, but he begins right away, the Yakar, v'tamo shel davar, the reason. Can we imagine a reason? Okay, maybe if it's not clear what I just said. This putrid smelling ingredient is mixed in with 10 other ingredients that smell good. Now, my question is, what happens? We know that the incense has an unbelievable aroma, right? If a woman who was pregnant ever smelled it, she would never miscarry. It's an unbelievable, we can't even describe it because it's not in our vocabulary to describe how great this smell of the 11 ingredients were together. But you have one that is absolutely putrid. What's happening on a molecular level? Is it that when it's combined, there's actually a change? Is there like a change that's going on the chelbana, that now it no longer has the putrid smell? Or is it that the 10 are so powerful, they override the putrid smell? We're going to hopefully answer that question in many different ways. But this is what we read so far, that it's counted amongst the ingredients, and it's teaching us something, that when we have sinners in our midst, we should not push them away. In fact, it's to our benefit for some reason to include them. What exactly we're doing? We're comparing the chelbana to a sinner because they have a bad smell? I mean, what's going on here? So the Yakar says, Tama shel davar. You know what the reason for this is? Lefi she'im lo hayu poshei Yisrael beklal tanit. Now, this is also kind of cryptic, and we'll have to decipher what it means. That if the sinners of Israel were not included in our fast, they didn't join us. Yesh lechush, there is to be concerned or worried. Shelo yeh hatanit mitzvah, that this, we're fasting for a mitzvah. Okay, why are we fasting? First of all, we have certain days. There's one day in the Torah where we fast, and that's Yom Kippur, a day that we afflict our souls and we fast. We're going to focus on Yom Kippur to a certain extent, but any public fast. When we have paraniyut, when bad things come to the Jewish people, such as a drought or earthquakes or a war, for example, right? Bad things happen, we get together and we fast. What's the point of fasting? Really to pray, really to do tshuva. So he said, the Yakar is quoting this from the Gemara. It's Gemara. There is to be concern that not only is it not a mitzvah, you're not fulfilling a mitzvah, ella avera, you're actually doing a sin. We would be sinning if we went ahead and fasted and didn't include the Rishoyim. The reason I mentioned Yom Kippur, if you take a look real quick on number 3 on the source sheet, everybody knows what Kol Nidre is. And what is it that we do? We invite, we ask permission from Hashem. We want these sinners to join us on the holiest day of the year where we fast. So this is the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, Tafresh Yotet. On the night of Yom Kippur, the custom is that the reader says, the one who's the Chazan, in the court of high, in the court of low, meaning the heavenly court and the earthly court, with the consent of God and with consent of the congregation, we are permitted to pray together with the transgressors. Okay, it's a very I don't even have words to describe. Everyone has their own experience on Kol Nidre, but it's touching. It's a humble experience. Right. We're just ate a big meal. We're dressed in our finest. We come to shul. We know it's the holiest day. It's the day that God is forgiving us, and we're asking for sinners to come and join us. And we have to discuss exactly what that's all about. But that's the halacha. That is the in Kol Nidre. And then he says like this: Lo haya ole l'ratzon. Meaning, if you don't include these sinners in our fasts, in our public fasts, so not only is it maybe not a mitzvah, but it's actually a sin, and all that we're doing, the fast, the prayers, whatever efforts we're doing on that day, lo haya ole l'ratzon, it would not go up to find favor with Hashem. So the Yakar says, 4 lines down, Sharei Metzinu, we actually find a concept like this in Gemara Tainus, Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. You know what a Nazir is, right? Someone who perhaps wants to go through a life transformation, okay? They feel maybe they're too haughty and they need to, or maybe they find themselves addicted to a certain drug or alcohol or whatever it is, and they want to go what they call cold turkey. They make a vow. They make a vow that they're no longer going to drink wine, but a stam nazir, a regular nazir, it's for 30 days. So it's not a lifelong endeavor unless you have a certain chush to become a nazir shimshon, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about someone for 30 days, he makes himself a nazir, he's called a choteh, he's called a sinner. Now we have a concept that he actually becomes almost like a Kohen Gadol. He's so holy, he really is trying to elevate himself, and yet he has to bring a sin offering at the end of the 30 days. He's called a sinner. And why? Ba'avor shehizhir et atzmo min hayayin. Because he has, or she, has separated themselves from wine. And we know that God, one of the different questions, one of the first few questions you're going to be asked when you go up to heaven is, God's going to ask you, did you benefit from all the beautiful things I gave you? And you're going to say, well, I stayed away from broccoli. Well, he's going to ask you why. Or, one of those things that, has an acquired taste. Maybe chalva. I don't know. Somebody, for some reason, will say, no, I didn't. I know. No. Truth be told, what you should at least do is taste it once. I mean, if you were told, you're going to die or you have allergies already from this thing, okay, you're excused. But you will be judged. God will judge you for not trying that which was permissible to you in this world, because he created the world for pleasure. He created you as a pleasure-seeking being. Okay, so it's a sin. And we can actually see there is a Rashi there. If you look in number 6. It's Numbers chapter 6, verse 11. And there's going to be a sin offering brought by on behalf, or by the Nazir. And in Rashi, Eliezer Kapor mentions, why is he considered a sinner? He afflicted himself by abstaining from wine, thus he sinned against his own body. Just to get an insight, what's going on here. Okay, so let's go back into the Yakar. And he says, Aval im yesh beinenu poshe Yisrael. If we have amongst us sinners of, Jewish sinners, harei akol panim anu tzrichim lehisanos ba'avuram. We're actually fasting for their sake. We're fasting on their account. I think that's probably a better. So what does it mean? It's like this. We're fasting because of paraniyut, because of bad things that came into the world. Are you aware that bad things only come into the world because of the sinners? In other words, earthquakes and famine and whatever, other things. So it came in because of them. And so what are we doing? What are we accomplishing? If we go ahead and we fast, how does that change the situation? We're already righteous and we're fasting. It's not a bad idea to get them included. It's because we're fasting for them anyway. And there's a concept, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zev Ba'ad Zeh. Every Jew is responsible for another. Now, what does that really mean? Not only am I responsible for you to make sure you make Kiddush, right? If there's a non-religious Jew not making Kiddush, I suffer. We're all in this together. When we stood at Mount Sinai, we said, Da'asev v'nishma. We, the contract that we made with God, was all-inclusive of every Jew. Right? And we stood at Mount Sinai with as ish echad v'lev echad. And we're going to see some really mystical ideas, how, I said achdus, how we're all actually connected. So there are a few verses that are, I guess we'll call explanatory, why it is that we're all responsible for another. And that you might find, we're going to quote a few different ones, but go to number 9 in Leviticus 26:37. This is by the curses. Each man will stumble over his brother. Right? You're going to be running away from the enemy. You're going to be fleeing as from the sword, but without a pursuer. But in Hebrew, the kashlu ish be'achiv. The truth is, we all stumble over each other, and there are people that put themselves as stumbling blocks for us. Look at Rashi down below on number 9. The midrashic explanation, the kashlu ish be'achiv, each man will stumble because of his brother, meaning one person will stumble because of someone else's sin. So one person's sins, they're dragging us all down because all Jews are guarantors one for another. Okay, let's get back into the Yakar. And the last thing he mentioned was that we're all responsible for each other. And he says, Ubizeh miyushav, this actually resolves, minalan lomar, from where do we come up with this concept, shitziruf chelbana, this whole idea of combining this putrid smelling ingredient, it's moira al siruf poshim batanis dacha. This concept is teaching us regarding the inclusion of sinners when we do public fasts. Now, I have to tell you, he didn't answer it. He says this is going to answer it. This next paragraph will begin to answer why or what the connection is between this particular incense and fasting, and what it has to do with achdus, and what it has to do with kishur, connection. Okay, so now the Yakar will begin his answer. Uma shema'anam bein sameh hakatoras dafka. Why is this chelbana included in the ingredients, particularly for the incense? Lefi sha'ayidei hatzomot. Tzom is fasting. V'hatashuva. And the resulting repentance, right? Tshuva, the fast is for a reason. It's not just a fast. It's in order to encourage us to do tshuva. Na'asu haziddonos l'zuchuyot. Let me go through this a little bit better. What happens is our willful sins actually become merits and like counted as if we did mitzvahs. Now, it doesn't mean go out and sin and then trick God, because God can't be tricked. You can't do the sin in order that it should be merits. You do the sin because you really desire to do the sin. Then you did tshuva and repented. If you repent out of love, then it becomes a positive. It's like from the black into the red. You were like when we left Egypt, we were minus 50. So we went for 50 days through the desert until we arrived, right? Till we received the revelation. But we weren't at zero. We were at plus, right? We traveled 49 days, so we were minus 49, and then we were plus 49. And that's through hard work and effort, okay? So the doing of a mitzvah obviously takes time and effort and thought. Kavanah. Guess what? Doing a sin. Ziddonos, a meaningful sin, meaning not meaningful, a premeditated sin, took kavanah and intent and action. And when you do tshuva from love, it becomes like flipped. It becomes the positive energy, the exact opposite of the negative energy that you created. Now, if you do tshuva out of fear, it's also not so bad. You get wiped clean. But just think about it. Would you, after, God forbid, all these negative acts in your life, so you get a new start? That's cool. I'm not against that. That's like, great. So if you do tshuva out of fear, you get a clean slate. But can you imagine, we've talked about some of your lives, my life, private. Imagine the things that we've done. It gets actually turned around as if we did mitzvahs all those times. That's unbelievable. So there's a verse in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 2. You'll find this, if I'm not mistaken, number 10 on the bottom of 3. This is Isaiah speaking about Jerusalem, not necessarily very positive here. We experienced a lot of pain. Speak to the heart of Jerusalem and call to her, for she has become full from her host, and all the pain for her iniquity has been appeased. So the Hebrew is, and we have it here on the sheet, ki nirtza avona. The sin is actually appeased. What does that mean? Shagam ha'avon ya'aleh l'ratzon l'reach nichoach. It's as if the sin, remember, Yerushalayim did tshuva, that the sin goes up and Hashem accepts it willingly with a reach nichoach. It's a phrase that it's hard to understand, but a sweet savor. When you smell something good. So it became a positive. You can already begin to see the connection between what we call ta'anis and somot becoming a sweet savor like the kataret. This is a little bit harder to understand in Song of Songs, because Chazal tells us in Gemara Sanhedrin, Kepelach harimon rakatech. So basically, it's talking about, in a certain sense, like the cheeks, but people put on rouge, right? Women put on rouge, not people. Women, they put on rouge. So your cheeks are, a certain color, and it could be like the rimon. And we have here a verse. It's Song of Songs. Where do we find it on the sheet? Anybody see it? Call it out. I hope I didn't make a mistake and not put it. It's number 5. Okay, your your lips are like the scarlet thread, and your speech is comely. Your temple is like a split pomegranate from within your kerchief. First of all, Song of Songs is extremely difficult to read and translate exactly word for word. We have to use Rashi and the allegory. And Kepelach harimon rakatech, rake could mean empty. And so our sages explain the allegory to mean even your worthless ones, which are the rakim, the ones who are empty, are actually full of mitzvot as a pomegranate. So we've been talking about including the sinners in our fasts and our prayers, and this is a little bit hard to get your head around. They're called rakim because they don't have mitzvahs. But on the other hand, one second, how can they not have mitzvahs? You have this statement that says even the most empty ones are full. So we're back to square one. Then why are they called empty? If they're empty, they're not full. And if they're full, they're not empty. And yet, they're empty. So we have to explain that, and we will right now. Afilu reikim shebach maleim mitzvahs karimon. Even your most empty ones are actually full of mitzvahs and I don't know if anybody here ever counted, many times. Now, it's not easy to cut open and figure out how many they are, so you have to kind of peel it and do it right. But basically, I've always come to a roundabout number 613. When you cut it, so you don't know how many halves you have, but basically, consider 613 seeds in a rimon, in a pomegranate. So the Yakar asks, this is difficult. If they're actually empty, if they're actually full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate, then why are we calling them empty? Because these people have done tshuva. Now, I deal with a lot of Beli tshuva. What exactly is that stage where you can say someone's about tshuva? I'm going to say already to the point where they walk into shul on Yom Kippur and they're full swing sinners. The very fact that they walk into a shul on Yom Kippur, or they joined a public fast because of piranhas that are happening to Jewish people, they're joining themselves to the Jewish people. That is like the initial stage, and we cannot even judge how valuable that is. That's already says a lot. Okay, that's what I want to say. But he says like that. Kiko po'al reik shebehem, because of all of their empty actions, the hainu ha'avon, meaning their sins, mimenu yitmalo mitzvos. From those empty acts, they turn and they transform into mitzvahs. And they're full of mitzvahs. Because we already said, Ziddonos harekos nasu chazuchuyot, that all those negatives are turned around into merits. V'yalagam ha'avon l'reach nichoa kamo ha'mitzvah. And then it's going to go up to Hashem. Also their sins as a sweet savior to Hashem, just like the mitzvahs would. And the dugma is the chelbona. The whole example we're giving all along is that putrid smelling ingredient. Ha'oila l'rekni koach. It's actually coming up with a sweet savor. Kekol shar simonim, like all the other ingredients. Umikan lamdu lomar. And from here we learn to say, she'inin ze marames al hatanis v'atshuva, that it has to be talking and hinting at the idea of not just tainus, but the tainus and the tshuva that comes along with the fast. HaGemara mevi maimra hashayechet l'samnei hakataras. So this Gemara is going to bring this idea of the ingredients for the incense. And it's in the name of Rab Chana Bar Bizna, said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Chasida. He says, Kol ta'anit she'ein ba poshe Yisrael, mi poshe Yisrael. If you don't include in your tainus, and tainus is going to be prayer, okay? Then what? First of all, the translation of Posheya Yisrael, according to Rabbeinu Gershom, are Shechoizrim b'tshuva u'mitanim, people who have already returned, Bali Tshuva. Like I said, I think just stepping in the door is you already have that label because you're fasting. Eina chashuva tainus. If you don't include them, it's like not even fasting. And the example was the chelbana is reach ra, has a bad smell. Nevertheless, it's included. What we didn't see was Abaya. Abaya says from a different verse. In other words, he's arguing. By the way, when it says Abaya Omer or Omer Abaya, does anybody know that's a trigger? If you learn Gemara, you'll know that if it says Abaya Omar, it means he's arguing with the previous statement. If it says, so if it says Amar Abaya, I said that's when he's arguing. I'm sorry, that means he's agreeing. So here you see he's arguing, and you want to know what he's arguing on? He's not arguing on the principle. He's in total agreement that if you don't have the Poshe Yisrael amongst you when you're doing a tainus, it's not counted. But he quotes a different verse. He disagrees with the source. That it's not from the Chelbana included, but it's rather from a prophet Amos chapter 9, verse 6. So look at number 4. He who built his upper stories in heaven, obviously we're talking about Hashem, and has founded his company on earth. In Hebrew, the agudato al eretz yosoda. He actually, through the unification of the Jewish people, the world will continue to exist. And this is really heavy stuff here. When we have this unity, and I'm going to tell you, I have been involved with this Jewish world my whole life, to a certain extent, Started off not religious, then religious, but I never saw in my entire life, and I've spoken to a lot of people, they agree, the disunity that existed, and it was no coincidence, on the Yom Kippur, before this latest incidental war that's happening right now. The world exists, and we can only win wars, by the way. The Yakar speaks about this other places. We can only win wars when we first are united, and then we will conquer. If we are disunified, is that a word? Not unified? Then we stand no chance, little chance. Okay? So that is based on this. And that's what Abaya says. Abaya says this is the verse. I'll just read his words. Mipasuk zeh yesh lumot shekol tanis sarik shiyas tarfu eleha miposhe Yisrael. You have to learn that every tainus, it's not just Yom Kippur, that you have to include them, and it's from this verse, meaning shekasher kol Yisrael ma'agudim yachad, when all the Jews are unified together, af haposhim behem, even with the sinners amongst us, az mitkayem, then will exist al eretz yosda, the foundation of the world, meaning the people, the Jewish people, meaning that Hashem is said as olam avuram. He's continuing to maintain the world on their account, meaning the Jewish people being unified. Now, if you notice, this page has two sides. Well, actually, it's the front of this and then the next page. So this is just absolutely amazing. I beg you to listen carefully and hang in there. I actually wrote myself some notes here. Just where are they? Good question. I thought I did. Oh, here they are. Okay. On the right side, where it says Kaf Pei on the bottom, see my finger? Okay. The next paragraph down. Ha'inyan b'ktisha. You have to grind very finely these ingredients. By the way you grind them for Yom Kippur is totally different than when you grind them for the whole year. Okay? So, it has to be especially ground very fine on Yom Kippur. But anyway, before Yom Kippur. In the name of the Shem Mishmuel, he explains this ketoris, the hakatoret, the actual incense, inyana kishur. What's kishur? Kishur is a knot. It means unified. It means connected. Va'achdut. Bein simaneha nimnit chelbana shi misa melit et poshe Yisrael. Actually, I want to use my sheet. I made all my little notes. Here it is. So this idea is, amongst the ingredients is counted the chelbana, which is a simile, like the word simile. It means symbolism. Misamelit. A semel is a symbol. So the chelbana symbolizes the poshe Yisrael. I think you got that point already, right? K'mevuar b'samach, like we're going to explain even further. Al kein tzarich katisha. Therefore, it requires an extra special grinding. V'dicha meruba, a really fine pounding. In order to be what? Shiflu hadat. It's like shiflu taruach. Basically, a diminishing of ego, right? A feeling lowly and subjective humility. Let's use humility. Bitu shachoymer, and a real separation, stamping out the physicality. Kedei le'efshar iruf hagun, in order that when you have a mixture, if it's not really finely mixed, then you're going to have globs. I'm sure, when you're in the kitchen, you see if you don't mix up all the dry ingredients first, then you throw it into the wet ingredients, you're going to have globs. So you take all the dry ingredients and you really grind them small, and then you mix them up. So it's a fine mixture. And what happens as a result? Achdus malaya. It's complete achdus, complete unity. Ubetainus Yom Kippurim, and what happens on the fast of Yom Kippur? Shboragilim Kol Yisrael lavo it's taref b'tfilatan ka'echad. This is what we do. We, as we mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, we call everybody, and you know what? People come, even the sinners. Az tzarich kachisha. It's going to be a fine mixture. People don't even know who's who, right? Everyone's dressed up in their finest, in their white. Okay, then you need to have that fine katisha daka, min hadaka, as finely as possible. Kedei lehichanes chelbana, in order that the chelbana itself mixes in with everything else. Lifnei lifnim ba'agudas achas, into the most inner places where it's going to go on Yom Kippur, the Holy of Holies, and it's going in a fine mix like Guda Achas im Kulam. The whole mixture is mixed very well. So it says, Ma hashayachet bein ta'anis lekatoris. What exactly is the relationship between fasting and the incense? So we already read the Gemara, and the Aruch Lener explains, it's like 3 lines down, Bir et hashayachis bein ta'anis lekatoris. He explains the relationship between fasting and the incense, according to a Mishnah in Tainus, that what is the main purpose of our fasting? She'ikar ta'aniti she'yishma tfilatam, that our prayers should be heard, right? When you're experiencing hunger, you cry out, right? You see it. You see that's what happens. So it's an affliction of the body in order to get in touch with the spiritual part, but in order to get in touch with the spiritual part, there has to be kind of like a crushing to a certain extent on the body side. And that's what he says. That Ketuv. Now there's a verse in Psalms 141, 2. So that's number 13 on the source sheet. My prayer, King David says. King David, your great-great-great-great-grandpappy. Tichon tefilati. So my prayer should be established as ketoris lefanecha. Guys, you're seeing the connection here. That the prayer itself is very much like the ketoris. It should be like going up with a satisfactory response. Hare tefillah shava leketoris. So you see that the tefillah is equated or similar enough to the ketoris. Now, where did we learn? I think Daniel asked me before the shir. It says bir halimud mechelbana. The explanation of the actual learning. How do we learn from this word chelbana? So the Siftei Chachamim explains, that the word chelbana does not appear first. Hu shemizeh shelo ketuv b'Torah chelbana b'rosh hasmanim o b'sof el beinehem. That one putrid ingredient is not in the beginning, because in the beginning you could say, well, maybe it's not included, or it's not mixed well, or at the end, maybe it's not included or mixed well. The very fact that it appears in the middle of the list shows you that it has to be part of this idea which he says, Yesh lumod shegam et haposhim yesh siruf beinenu. It has to be mixed with us. The next thing is, Kilolo fuke minion shekulam tzadikim. You might think for a second, well, we have all these, let's say 30 of us, we're all davening together, we're all tzadikim. What do we need them for? In fact, they're only going to bring us down. That's what we might think. And what did we say? If you don't include them, it's not going to go up. It's not a good thing. You need to include them. So the Iyun Yaakov writes, Ein a pirush she'im heim kulam tzadikim. Don't think that if you're all tzadikim, she'ein ta'anitam v'truvatam mikubelet. So don't think that your fasts and your prayers are not going to be accepted. Because we do see, and this is a famous verse in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 21. Truth is, I think I didn't bring it down, and I should have, but it's something we all know, if we're familiar with Pirkei Avot, or Parachelek and Sanhedrin, this famous verse that says that your people, all of them, are righteous. Forever they shall inherit the earth. So this is one of the proofs that all Jews will go to Olam Haba. Right? All Jews are going to... Now, I have to give some background. Listen, Rabbi Kessin will explain. Yes, there's plan A, then there's plan B, and then there's plan C. Plan A always means lichachila. That's the original plan, and that's to do mitzvahs, and you go to Olam Haba. But God knows that we're weak, we're human, and He gave us plan B. Plan B is tshuva. Thank God. So He gave us option B, but obviously option A is really the only option. And then if we failed, so then there's plan B. He knows we don't always do tshuva 100%. We're humans, we're flesh and blood. So we don't do tshuva 100%, some of us. So He gave us plan C. But eventually we're going to get to Olam Haba. So what's plan C? Suffering. Very good. We spoke about this week. Suffering. Suffering. Whether in this world or the next world. We do kind of hope that we don't have to suffer in the next world. Let me hold off a second. So, that's just a side point. The Yakar says, and he's quoting this verse, everyone's tzaddikim. What does that mean? Ein ben Dovid bo. You know, Mashiach is not coming. Ad sheyeh dor shekulo zakai. Or, God forbid, the other way. The Mashiach's not going to come. The son of David is not coming until we're all righteous. Or, God forbid, we'll all need salvation because of our sins. But here, Ron Sanhedrin, now he says, don't think the kavanah is like you think. If there are some negative, folks around in our generation, ein tzarich lahafrisham min hatzibur, lidchot even hanofel. Don't think that you have to get rid of them, right? Because we're all waiting for Mashiach, and we're all wanting to be a righteous congregation. Don't get rid of them. Don't get rid of them like a stone that falls away. But rather, it says in Deuteronomy chapter 14:1, which you'll see is number 14 on the source sheet, even though this verse is clearly referring to when people mourn, they shouldn't over mourn and cut their skin. That is the way of the non-Jews. But rather, even it says, you are the children of the Lord your God. You shall neither cut yourselves nor make baldness between your eyes for the dead. Now, in Hebrew, lo hit godadu means don't cut yourself. Don't cause yourselves to be cut off from the people. Don't create cliques and groups. Don't, right? You understand? Don't cut yourself off. Don't make groups. Don't make agudos, cliques and groups that are, the opposite of achdus. Achdus is where everybody is under the same umbrella, have the same thoughts. Look, it says, lo tasu agudos. And what happens when you make these different groups? Your chelek libam ota ya'ashamu. You end up dividing your hearts. Okay? But if you're all unified, even though you have amongst you these sinners, tefilatam chuvatam mekubelis, your prayers, your fast, everything will be accepted by Hashem. And it's also brought in Gemara Menachos. This is a famous expression we all know when we bring the four minion together, right? The lulav and the esrog and the aravos and the hadassim. They represent different kinds of Jews. I know they also represent different parts of your body. And we're not going to get into that, but different types of Jews. One of them, the esrog, has both smell and taste, which represents Torah and mitzvahs. And on the other extreme, you have the aravos, which has neither Torah nor mitzvahs. We would assume that was talking about the Russia. Here he says, Arba minim shebalulav. So you have the four species in the lulav. Ein adam yotzi de chavoto. You cannot fulfill your obligation of this mitzvah, this important mitzvah, ad shu kulam b'gur achas, until they're all bound together. V'chein Yisrael. So too by the Jewish people. V'hartza'a ad sheyu kulam b'gur achas. We will not be willingly accepted by God until we are all unified. Guys, let's cut out the stuff that was going on before Yom Kippur of 2023, 5780, well, it was already 84, but, let's cut it out, man. Let's get rid of it. We're going to change the world. We're going to bring Mashiach. Ki arba minim ramazim gam kain al tzadikim rishayim kamavor b'midrashim. When you bring it all together, the four species, it's just like bringing the tzadikim and the rishayim together. Now, Shaychus hatzarfus chelbana letzarfus harishayim. We're going to get a little bit more into this idea of the relationship of combining this putrid ingredient chelbana to the concept of bringing together and joining with rishayim. So in the Drashas Haran, he explains that the chelbana is placed with the sameh kataris, placed with all the other ingredients. Hayamin hanira. Now, what would the appearance be? Shetafsid otam lehefsid recha. You would think that if you add this 11th ingredient with the other 10, it's going to diminish. This thing is not going to smell so nice. Right now it smells okay. And I put this putrid thing, it's going to smell worse. Im kol zeh, nevertheless, im talanu hanavua, she'ein lehem shleimut zulato. We know through the prophets, we know through prophecy, so to speak, it's confirmed, it's validated. The opposite is true. That it is not complete. It is not complete without it. Kikein ha'inyan imanu. This is exactly in our service to God. Ba'avodoteinu Hashem yisbarach. When we serve Hashem, we want a complete service to God. We want to be true of the Hashem. Guess what? Chatoim ha'poshim shalo yafsidu avodoteinu. They are not diminishing our service by them being around us. In fact, our service to God is going to increase by them around, not diminish. as you may have thought from the Chelbana. And the Seder Hayom, he explains, and I'll just read it in English, he explains that the Chelbana, even though it has a bad smell, nevertheless, when it's connected with all the other ingredients together, right, it actually, he claims that the Reach Ra is mistalik mimena. Maybe it's either, like I said, it's either through the chemical reaction that it loses its negative smell, or the overpowering of the other 10, but it loses its smell. And then he says, Adarabah, not only does it lose its smell, it's mosefet reach tov le samin acherim. It actually is going to enhance and give off a better smell to those 10 had it not been included. Ki ein ha'or nicker ele mitoch ha'choshech. You cannot recognize the light except in darkness. When I say that, I use this room as an example. There's, 30 different light bulbs in this room. If you flicked one off, I don't think it would make a difference. But if you had a dark room and you had just one candle or one match and you flicked it off, it would make a world of a difference, right? So you don't see the light. The light is not recognizable except within darkness. So too, God commands us. He wants us. Tzivoy Chazal, the rabbis say, Kol tefilu she'ein ba mi poshe Yisrael, any group of people that are praying, and they're not including the sinners, eino tefillah, it's not even considered tefillah. Going back to, we're starting a beginner's minion. You missed that in the beginning, but we're starting a beginner's minion. Nobody's judging anything and anybody. Right? Anybody who wants to join is certainly welcome to join. Even women, we have a partition. I hope that's not offensive to anybody, but that's where we're going to do it. Okay? So, Eino tefillah v'uremez linyanzeh. Now, there's so much here. We didn't even get to the next page yet. The Zahav Siva explains the comparison, Diomi, the comparison of a fast of the sinners to the Chelbana that has a bad smell. Just like it's written, Perki de Rebbe Eliezer. Oh, this is an amazing story. I have to tell this story. Rebbe Eliezer ben Horkenes, he was sitting, he learned by by Yochanan ben Zakkai. And he was sitting and he was crying. Can you imagine the desperation to learn Torah? I want, like Rebbe Akiva, right? I want to learn Torah. I remember when I went to yeshiva and I was in my early 20s. I knew nothing. And I felt like this. Anyway, he was crying. And he said, all I want to do is learn Torah. So he asked him, why are you crying? He says, Ani mevakesh lilmod Torah. Can you imagine coming, crying, I want to learn Torah? Amar lo. So he taught him 2 halachas every day. And Rebbe Eliezer ben Horkenes, he went over the lessons and he really became familiar with the lessons and everything was organized. So comes the 8th day, and it was a fast day, apparently, or he didn't eat. For some reason, he was not eating. I don't know if you ever feel this way on a fast day, but you're really looking for the gargle. You're looking for the mouthwash. And you know that you're limited here. You have a bad smell, okay? It's coming out of your mouth. Listen to how he puts it at the Chelbana. Unbelievable. Right? We're talking about Chelbana, and he's talking about a fast day having a bad smell come out of your mouth. So it says, Lo tam klum, until Reach Piv lived near Rabbi Yochanan, until a bad smell came out of his mouth in front of him. He stood up before him, and then he went ahead and he sat down and he started crying again. So the Rebbe said to him, why are you crying? And he said, I came before you like a man who stands before someone with maka shchin, like great pain, physical pain, like boils all over my skin, all over his skin. So he said, my son, this is his blessing to him. This is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's blessing to Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. He says, just as you have this bad smell that's coming up before me from your mouth, you know what should be? The blessing should be that should be Yalech Chukei Reach Torah Mepicha L'Shamayim. That the sweet words of Torah should elevate from your mouth to heaven. So he says, if that's the case, it's clear now that through a tinus, most people, they have this bad smell. And if you're a Russia, that like adds insult to injury. I don't know if you know this, but depends what kind of sins, but there are sins that create bad smells from your mouth because of averis. So in this is tzodek shedima tainis lechelbana. So you can see the justification, the correct analogy of the tainis to this particular ingredient that has a bad smell. So let's just see. And I want to kind of go to the next page now. That would be Kuf Kafet. This is just really amazing stuff. Basically, the last thing, what happened was, let me just read the last line there. Basically, the Gemara is telling you not to push off the sinners from tinus, and it would come out great that the tinus is actually good. Okay, that everybody would end up having, af shekula reach ra mipiv, that even everyone who ends up having, let's say, a physical bad smell come out of their mouth during the tinus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mikablo l'reach tov. The way Hashem sees your suffering, it's with the bad smell, right? I don't know if that's the worst part of our fast. For some people, that's the worst part of their fast. You can imagine, there are certain people, that's just like kids can't stand it. But that is an unbelievable merit. Okay? That was what Rabbi Eliezer was blessed by Rabbi Yochanan with. Kol aval ta'anis Peshe Yisrael ole recham ve'en lem b'ma l'taken. So if you're not doing tshuva, and you have this bad smell, and there's nothing to fix it, so then this is going to affect everyone else in a negative way. And oila Russia, oila shkena. We have this concept. It's not so simple that we should associate with evil people. They will have an effect on us. There's a halacha, we don't have it today, but it pertains to the walls of people who end up with saras on their walls, right? The concept of leprosy is not just on skin, it applies to clothing and applies to walls in houses. And if you have a very, let's say, a neighbor who's a yenta, whatever, that talks a lot of Lashon Hara, God forbid, what could happen is your wall would have to be, you'd lose money basically. It's your loss because you just happen to have a bad neighbor. So on this hand, it's actually, again, the idea that maybe it's something bad. And that's what the Gemara is telling us. Yoter tov siru from Peshe Yisrael. Don't think like this when it comes to at least trying to help them. Right? You're doing a tinus, you're doing tefillah. As soon as they walk into this, a holy atmosphere, it should help change them. Okay? So that's what the idea here is. And how do we know that? The Drisha explains from the Gemara, never, ever, ever give up hope. And I think it's talking about the Rasha himself, but if it's true by the Rasha, then it's certainly true by us when we think about them. The evil person, the person who needs to do tshuva, should never, ever, ever give up. Yeyush should never give up from doing tshuva. And the raya, the proof is this, like the chelbana, is mivatelet. It actually is negated into the other ingredients for atonement. That's what the Ketoris does. It acts as an atonement. It's exactly what happens when they do tshuva. And right, Ya'im Hatzadikim, the Gan Eden, they will be with the righteous in the Garden of Eden. Now, this last piece, if anybody wants to leave, I don't want to hold them. This last piece is all about Achdus. Bir ha'inyan shiyu kol Yisrael bagudam yachad. This is the explanation of the idea that all Jews should be connected together. And I'll just tell you, you got the Piskei Arid, the Maharal, Ruveda Bachaya, the Rif, the Ber Maim Chaim, the Kli Yakar, which we're not going to read because we already read that. He brings it down. This is in the back of the Metifta. You got the Me'am Loez, which I know Ephraim loves. You got the Chidah. You got the Yars Davash. You got the Miras Ayin. You got the Ben Yehoyada. You got the Pri Tzadik and the Shem Mishmo. I'm going to try to go. Actually, I listed them all in my own English. Maybe that's what I should do. Just read them to you in English and what they mean. So the Piskei Harid, he says, when all Israel wants, they actually want to be, we all do, right? We want to be accepted favorably before Hashem. It's only going to become together, just like the angels. Apparently the angels are all unified. There's no machlokas. Just for any Christian listening, there's no such thing as a fallen angel. There's no such thing as a rebellious angel. Doesn't exist, okay? Every angel doesn't even have free will. They do, and the Satan, which is an angel of God, is doing God's will by testing us for our benefit. Okay? We're the exercise of growth. Exactly. Okay. So they're all one. They're all bound as one unit, and we become like angels. Okay? Through unification, just like they are. The Maharal explains that what the tzaddikim actually do, we, the tzaddikim, we defend or we guard the sinners. So we're actually protecting them. Right. The Rabbeinu Bechaya, he explains at the very moment of tshuva, and I'm going to tell you, when I first became religious, and my best friend was trying to convince me to become religious, he said, when you walk up those, to the 45th floor in your mother's apartment, instead of taking the elevator, the angels are singing. When you're not driving that car and you're walking 3 miles, the angels are singing. And this is what's happening. When the very moment of tshuva, there's like something breaking forth in heaven, and the clouds are moving, and there's like the God of hand is coming down, so to speak. And what happens at the moment of tshuva, the sinners actually become tzaddikim, and as we know, all of Israel is responsible for each other, so ultimately, this is going to help us. The Rif explains, when the sinner is near us, maybe I should read the Rif. The Rif says, it's based on very, very interesting, in Genesis 19:19, which I brought a copy of Rashi in English, very important. He explains, Mashet Sarich, why do we need the sinners? We actually need them within us, because it's Marich Masa Hador V'Nik Shavim L'Tzadikim. What happens is, we end up looking better when they're around. You know the concept? In other words, we're like, let's say, average blokes, right? And you get a few bad apples. Man, we're like, we got all the gold stars. Like, we really look good. You follow? Don't think it's such a foreign concept. Lot? Was he a tzaddik? I don't think so. But in Genesis 19:19, he was tzaddik compared to the people of Sodom. Right? You can imagine. So Rashi says over there, I'm sorry I didn't bring this down on the source sheet, but Rashi brings this idea, right? I'll tell you the verse. This is Lot saying, see now your servant has found grace in your eyes, and your kindness was great, with which you did with me to save my life. So, but I cannot flee to the mountain lest the evil attach itself to me and I die. Rashi says, when I was next to the people of Sodom, the Holy One, blessed be He, saw my deeds and the deeds of the town people, I would appear righteous and worthy of being saved. But when I come next to you, Avraham, wow, I'm like a wicked person, right? I mean, you get the idea. So we need these Rishoyim. Not that we need them to be Rishoyim. We need them once they already are, and it's their own free will. We shouldn't do without them because it's to our benefit that they're around. Then you have the Ber Mayim Chaim, the sinner himself. When he comes to your presence, and I don't know if anybody experienced this, I imagine every Baal Tshuva probably did, there's a little bit of shame. That shame is part of the Tshuva process. So they come to shul, and maybe they're not dressed as everyone else. Maybe they're not, and maybe, it could be a problem. Then maybe they want to run away. But the very fact that there's a little bit of shame, it's not based on dress, but it's based on the Kedusha, the holiness of the atmosphere that's created. So that is what the sinner feels shame when in the presence of righteous people, especially when you're fasting and you're praying. So the righteous are bestowing a benefit of creating mezakeh, creating benefit. Just for them coming to you and feeling the shame, which is part of the tshuva, you're helping them. Okay? The Moam Loez. He mentions punishment only comes to the world because of sinners, right? Peranios only comes into the world because of them. By the way, even though that's the first statement, that's all I said, it says who gets affected first are the righteous. Okay, so back in the day when there was such a scare, I'm not even going to mention the name of the scare, but people were getting shots. What do they call those things? Jabs. Anyway, when people started putting masks on and hiding, what I want to say, that unfortunately we lost a lot of very holy people. And I told people from the very beginning, this is something very bad. If we're going to lose some of the most righteous people in the beginning, it's exactly what the Gemara says, that bad things only come into the world because of evil people, but who gets burnt first? It's the righteous. It's based on a verse where if you're not responsible with fire, you light fire, but you're not responsible, it says it goes out and it burns, I'm sorry, I don't have the pasuk in front of me, but basically it burns the, what are those things, thorns, and eats the grain. But it doesn't say, it says it eats the grain and then burns the thorns. So it's the opposite order. So when the Peranios comes to the world, it first eats the grains, which are the good people, and then burns the thorns. The Chidah speaks about there's a spark of holiness in every Jew. Okay? You heard about this? Maybe I should read the Chidah. It's really amazing because he's quoting the Zohar. You're just going to miss the Zohar right now. Okay. So, right, we don't learn Zohar that often, but he's quoting the Zohar. So he says, Shemi shemazach es chayavim, if you could bestow benefit onto these sinners, ein erech l'scharo, you can't imagine the reward. It's unbelievable. U'bnei adam ilu haya yodim kama malos toidos, if anybody would understand the benefit that you're giving these people, that you're that are, you're giving them a schut to their negativity, you would be chasing it like someone who would be chasing after a snake, something after, to really with all your energy. And he says, Vada chayev zeh, meaning this Russia, certainly this Russia, is chayter migeze kadoshim. Basically, he's like that spark inside, it's shooting forth. It wants to grow. It's like a shoot, like it talks about in Isaiah 11:1 about the shoot of Jesse. It's this thing that wants to grow, this kedusha inside the Jew that wants to sprout forth, but shegavra bo klipa. But they're the negative forces that are keeping it from reaching its potential. That's why you need to include them in the fast. Someone who is the sinners of Israel, because through this, ready, what will happen? Machniim l'sitra akra, v'nenem b'tainis. They're feeling the shame, or they're being subjugated by the sitra akra. That's the negative side, but you're releasing it, or it's being affected. The sitra akra, the negative forces, are being affected through the fast. And so we learn from the different ingredients of the incense that are counted, right? The chelbana, but it's not just the chelbana. There's another ingredient called the halavona. There's a hay in the halavona, and there's a chet in the chelbana. You can almost, make a mistake. Where else do we find a hay that turns into a ches? By matzah and chametz. Okay? So matzah is what we do eat on Pesach, and chametz is that which we do not eat on Pesach. Now, all year round, bread is fine, and it doesn't represent anything necessarily of an evil inclination. But on Pesach, the chametz is stagnation and the unwillingness to move, right? And it's ego, and it's bloated, and there's something very negative about chametz. Matzah, the same letters with the mem and the tzaddik, but you have a hay instead of a chet. You have chet for chametz, matzahs with a hay. Same letters, just different order. So what's the difference between a chet and a hay? It's a really fine line. So we're talking about that spiritual sprout, that small point called a pintel yid, that small point that can expand and change a hey to a chet, or vice versa, a chet to a hey. It's just one point. And that's what he says here in the Yaros Davash. Shekashem chametz umatzah shavim rak benekuda chet beineim. It's just that one dot in the little chet that changes it to a hey. Ve'imachet ta'aseh hey yematzah. So too, by the chelvana, im b'makom chet, you put a hey, then it's halavona. That's the frankincense. So too, be'ta'aroves bitoch simnei ketars, when you mix up all the different ingredients, ub'makom reach ra yariach af yazariach. It's a beautiful expression here. What happens when you mix them nicely? So then what happens to the kataris? It actually changes, in place of a reach ra, bad smell, it actually turns into a pleasant smell. That's why you need to mix the sinners of Israel into your tainus in order to benefit from this thing. And it's not just a small thing, it's a great thing. It's davar gadol. Shiyu klulam imanu. To invite them and to include them, it's something huge. Huge. What is davar gadol? Big. It's a big thing to include them with us. And what ends up happening is yala reach tov gam chelbana. That in the end, even the chelbana is producing a beautiful smell. The Me'iras and Naim, if you want to read with us, it would be helpful too. Katav, he writes, God forbid, shebechas v'chalila, that there is some kind of a tsar or a gezer that comes to the world, right? Then we do a tainus tzibur. We get everyone together to fast. Iker davar lomar divrei kibushin la'ore es am b'tshuva. So whoever's going to get up and speak is going to get everyone to cry and to do tshuva, right? They're going to talk about oppressive and the situation as it is. As gam im yesh ez b'nei adam shichatu. And if there are people in the audience, they're listening and they're sinners, they're nichna'im and it's tarfim b'leiv nishbar. They're going to join with a broken heart. Remember, we're comparing this to the chelbana. The chelbana is being transformed. This is the description of the sinner becoming transformed. Right. Either we're having influence on him, which is, you can't deny it, or there's a transformation taking place. And how we're going to put that into the chelbana, leave it to your imagination. It's got to be one of these two ideas. The whole night we're talking about the comparison of the Poshe Yisrael with the chelbana. Okay? And he goes on, he says, V'zema sha'amru kol tainus, every fast, she'ein ba mi Poshe Yisrael, if you don't include those Poshe Yisrael, mitztarfim tainus imatzibor, and right, they're not joining in order to become, submissive and humble through their tainus with everyone else. Because what happens when they do? If you include them in, they will. I don't know if it's a guarantee. I don't know how much, what the quality is, but through that they will be awoken to do tshuva. Truly awoke. Right? This is really what the definition of woke is, to do tshuva. And the Dorshe Roshomos, by the way, what's the word tzibor? You know what the word tzibor means? Shliach tzibor. A tzibor is tzadik, beit, vav, resh. It stands, according to the Darshe Rishumos, Tzadik, Benoni, Varasha. To have a tzibor, you need everybody. Don't push off those Rishoim and say, you can't be a part of this. And he says in the end of that little paragraph, Shakum yu ba'aguda achas, everyone will be united, as Yishma El v'ya'anem. Then God would listen. It's only through the audas. I hope this is clear. There's got to be either an overpowering on the Rishoim or a transformation. But in the end, through the audas, God would listen. The Ben Yehoyada, that's the Ben Ishkai, he says very similar that like we said before, that we need the Rishoim because there is a verse in Koheles, chapter 7, verse 20, Ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yachata. There's nobody around that's so righteous that doesn't sin. We all make mistakes. But through the Rishayim being around, we, the average guy, Benoni, whatever, we look like tzaddikim, like we saw by Lot. Okay, this is now, I think, the cream of the crop. You have the Pri Tzaddik. And he explains like this, that just as they are all, when they're all together, you have a Reach Tov. It's not just a Reach Tov, it's really good, because those 10 on their own have a Reach Tov. When you add the Chelbana, it even has a greater smell. We already spoke about that. Ki biyotem b'shurasham b'Yakov. When we talk about Jews, we talk about the Jewish people. Every Jew is a son or daughter of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right? That's our great-great-grandpappies and mammies. Who kol nefashos. So Yaakov included all the 70 souls that went down to Egypt, the 600,000 souls that came up from Egypt, the 15, 18 million Jews, however many there are today, the Yisrael, shebekol hadoros. Not only then, but also now. All in every generation, we're all part of Yaakov. V'heim bagud achas. We really are. The fact is, we really are connected. V'yotam yachad yitorer nekuda toiva. And you know what happens when we get together? Then we awaken a point, a very good point that's deep in our hearts. Not in our hearts, even in the hearts of the Rishoyim. Lehitchaber lekedusha. That they themselves, when we were all, for the last 4 months, getting together, there's an unbelievable awakening amongst the non-religious Jews. Whether they're actually watching TV, watching the news, even know about it. It could be in Hawaii on some island where there's no electricity. There's something that is going to awaken them through our being together. And he uses a term, it's very interesting, mitzad min et mino v'nior. In kashrus, when you're talking about kosher food and something gets mixed in, so if there's let's say chicken, and then there's meat, or let's say something that is totally not the same min. So there's more leniency of removing what is obviously not kosher, and when it's min v'min, it's impossible to know what's what. There's a stricter halacha, and there's a niur, there's an awakening. So in other words, it has a stronger isser. So here, but the idea is that there's a certain awakening. The we're niur. So when you have min v'min, so this person at the moment, maybe he's a Rasha, but by joining with you, he becomes a tzaddik, and we're all together, we're min v'min. Min means we're all the same type. So too, when we join together to fast, and the dugma, the example of the chelbana and the arava. Remember the arava, the willows by the 4 minim, when you bring them all together, to do a mitzvah, like fasting and prayer, so it's through the connection to do the mitzvah, you're awakening the holy root of Jewishness that he has still a little bit within him. And then that's going to help, there's moil hitchabruto, it's going to connect, it's going to help his connection, because he's now considered like you. And he says, not only is he like you, then there, like we talked about the chelbana, it's mosif koach. It's actually adding power. How? Because of, and I'm going to read in Hebrew, al yedei shemoitzim yakar mizoilel, because you're drawing forth that goodness out of the waste. Okay, there's like a birur. You heard that expression, birur? Like a cleansing process, a separation, even within him, that's going on. And the last opinion is the Shem Mishmuel, and he explains again the word ketores. Actually, the Targum explains it's kishur. Kishur is tying the knot. It's mamish, a connection, a tight connection. And anyone who sins, they sin because of what we call chashichut v'hester. The only reason they're sinning, we said before, because of ruach shtut, but here he's saying because of darkness and the hiddenness of God, so to speak. Ein adam oiver avela. Oh, okay. He says there is no person who creates a sin, a transgression, unless enters him a ruach shtut, some kind of folly. And the darkness and the hiddenness that results in a separation from that source root until the source no longer illuminates that person's soul. But what happens, Mamela, when they are doing tshuva, they're returning and they're connecting the rope, the chevel, that is hakusuf, that is of a great desire. It's deep inside every Jew. Az ma'at ha'or midche rav choshech. That little bit of light pushes off a lot of darkness. V'anei hester, and the clouds that are usually dark, and they hide the ruach tahara, the ruach tahara, the Holy Spirit that everyone, the pure spirit everyone has, of Rabbihem. So that's going to move those dark clouds away. V'aviram, it's going to move them away. Az Yakar lavo b'teshuva litkarev. It's going to make it easier to do tshuva when those dark clouds, the darkness is dissipated. It's going to make it easier to come close. Al ken afilu ba'odenu merachok. So even when we're far away, or that person is far away, it's efshar litztaref lekatoris. It's possible to join up with the incense, meaning lihit kasher. Remember, katoris means lit kasher. You think lit kasher means like to call somebody. It means to connect. To connect while you're still there, meaning far away. A lamashal, meaning they still have that, whatever the character traits of the chelbana, but you're mixing it in. But he's talking about someone who has this holy spark, wants to come close, they're still far away. So he brings down an example. It's lamashal mi shehushlach babor amok. So someone is sent into a very deep pit. What happens in that deep pit? It's efshar la'alot. You can't get up of this deep pit. Moridim lo chevel. You bring him that rope. Kedei, right? L'toch habor. Kasher nikshar bechevel. When you tie up, or he connects to that, he's just connecting to the rope. He's not even near the surface. He doesn't even see daylight. But he's inside that bore, and he's got a hold of that rope. Az yesh lo aliyah alidei chevel. Remember, he can still get up because he's got the rope. Therefore, it's easy for our eyes to see why we should connect ourselves with one connection, whether it's through tainus and tefillah, to these sinners. Ach im roitzim al kol panim l'tzaref imanu. If they want, we should not stop them. Let them join. Ki al yedei zeh he mitkashrim b'knesset Yisrael. They're joining the Jewish people. Hainu af sha'adayin omdim, even if they're standing merachok, even if they're standing very far away. Mikol makom al yedei ratzonam, because of their will. Lehit kasher mitkashrim b'klal Yisrael. They want to connect in that connection with the rest of us, which we think is like fabulous. I mean, we can't, we have like, there's no value. And my wife's a convert. And she says, if I ever accomplished anything in my life, it was conversion, like just to become a Jew. Everything was just for that. Az ruach hatahara overes behem umit'oratam l'tshuva. So then, by them connecting to the Jewish people, then this pure spirit comes over them, and they are awoken to do tshuva. Vaz tiye behem hayacholes. Then they have the ability l'hitkarev, to come close. Ki beli tshuva, because without any tshuva, efshar lehem litkarev. So the very fact it's like the very beginning seeds of tshuva. Okay, so I'm going to end the video here. I just want to mention just one more time, there really are source sheets, and I encourage you, because there's a lot of reading, and I skimmed through a lot of it, but I really want you to learn Hebrew. And B'ezrat Hashem, we learned a lot about tshuva, number one, whether it's for ourselves, for Am Yisrael, how we should look at audas. It's learned from the Chelbana. Again, I just want to stress this. What does it mean? Does the 10 overpower the 1? We don't know, but it has a greater smell. If it has a greater smell, not a lesser smell, it sounds like the second point is probably the truth, and that it chemically transforms, or that metaphysically transforms, and it actually enhances through the combination a greater smell, the 10 that didn't have before the Chelbana joined in. And therefore one should not be in their avodas, be fearful in their avodas Hashem. Again, in the right atmosphere, in the right place, at the right time. We're not talking about going to the bars, although there are certain people that maybe that's their avoda, to go into the discos. Remember the famous disco rabbi, right? There are certain people that can handle certain things. But at least when they come to you, lay out the red carpet. That's all I have to say. And what can I say? Have a great Shabbos. We'll see you next week. See you on the other end. And have a great life. And we'll see you next week. B'ezrat Hashem. Shabbat Shalom. Yeah.
It's